I stood on my own front porch, rain soaking through my jacket and dripping into my shoes, suitcase at my feet. Cold ran through me from my toes to my spine as I watched the front door. Then it opened, and my stepson appeared. Locks changed, eyes sharp, a sneer hanging like a shadow over his face. "Find somewhere else to die, Frank. You're useless now," he shouted. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard him. Grief does strange things, muffling voices, twisting the familiar into the monstrous. But the click of the deadbolt was deliberate, final. I heard him clearly. The porch light flickered overhead, still the one I'd installed last summer. I remembered that afternoon, standing on a ladder while Marjorie held the flashlight below, teasing me about my knees going soft. Now it buzzed faintly, casting a pale yellow circle around my shoes like an accusing spotlight. "Eb," I whispered, my voice smaller than I meant. "Let's just talk." The door cracked an inch. I caught a glimpse of his face, smile fixed, eyes flat. 41 years old, dressed like he was heading to a board meeting rather than evicting his stepfather from a house I'd lived in for 25 years. "You don't live here anymore," he said. "Mom made sure of that." Then he did something I'll never forget. He bent down, inside the entryway, and picked up the small cardboard box, the one Marjorie had kept on the hall table. Her handwritten recipe cards peeked from the top, edges yellowed, along with a few photographs. Our courthouse wedding in Joliet. A Thanksgiving long ago when Evan still smiled. He looked at the box, then at me, and without hesitation, dropped it into the trash can by the door. The lid clanged shut. Something tore loose inside me, sharp and sudden. Rain splashed up my jeans as I stepped forward without thinking. "That was your mother's," I said, voice tight, barely above the rain. "She's dead," he snapped, "and you're not my family." The door slammed. The lock turned. That was it. I stayed on the porch longer than I should have, long enough for old Mr. Orr from next door to peek through his curtain, then step onto his own porch pretending to check the mailbox. "Frankie," I called softly, "this ain't right." I bent down and fished the box out of the trash. The bottom was damp, but the cards survived. Marjorie's handwriting, neat, careful, slightly slanted, still stared back at me. Meatloaf, chicken soup, apple pie. Notes in the margins. "Frank likes extra cinnamon." I set the box in the back of the Ford F-150, the truck she had refused to give up even after retirement. "It still runs," she'd say. "So do I." I climbed into the driver's seat and just sat there, staring at the house, our house, the one we painted together, the one where I fixed the leaky sink, replaced the roof, paid the property taxes like clockwork. Rain blurred the siding, the windows, the memories. Marjorie had been gone 3 weeks. A stroke. Sudden. One moment we were arguing over a dishwasher. The next, I was holding her hand in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and bitter coffee, listening to machines slow, then stop. At the funeral, Evan had seemed polite, distant. He hugged me stiffly, thanked me for taking care of things. I'd thought grief made him awkward. I was wrong. I drove until the neighborhood faded and Route 30 opened ahead. The motel near the highway was shabby but dry. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. I dropped onto the bed and stared at the folder I'd carried from the house, insurance papers, hospital bills, bank statements, the detritus of a life cut short, mundane evidence of a world that kept moving even when it shouldn't have. I flipped through the papers slowly, the way Marjorie always did. She had insisted on reading every line, every clause. I hadn't. I trusted her to handle it. Then the memory came back, uninvited. The kitchen table, papers spread out. She took off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Frank," she said, calm, precise, "if something happens to me, promise me one thing." "What's that?" I asked, half listening, coffee in hand. "Read everything," she said. "Don't trust what things look like at first glance. Promise me." I squeezed her hand, smiling. "I promise." At the time, it felt small. Now, it was a rope tossed into deep water, pulling me towards something I wasn't ready for. I flipped the papers until a single sheet slipped from the folder, cream-colored, typed, heading in her handwriting, one line underlined twice, Section 9. I sat there, heart racing. A truck roared past. The motel sign buzzed. And for the first time since Evan slammed that door, I didn't feel completely helpless, not yet. Morning came too early. My heart raced like I'd slept through an emergency. I showered, donned my only clean button-down, and drove to the Denny's down the road. It smelled of burnt coffee and frying bacon, memory and loss wrapped in greasy air. I ordered eggs I barely touched and spread the papers on the table. Hospital bills, insurance forms, bank statements, they blurred together in gray ink, meaningless without context. And there it was again, Section 9, typed, underlined, the words echoing Marjorie's voice. Read everything. Don't trust what things look like. I folded it carefully and returned it to the folder, the way she would have done. The law office was an old brick building, tucked between a dentist and a real estate agency. Harlan and Beck, attorneys at law. Faded letters above the door. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Evan was there, already seated, ankle over knee, scrolling on his phone, tailored jacket pressed, hair perfect. He looked up as I walked in. "Didn't think you'd show," he said, smirk fixed. "I was told to be here," I said evenly. He shrugged. "Guess it's good to see things through." Thomas Beck came out moments later, late 50s, wire rim glasses, gray hair. He shook Evan's hand first, then turned to me. "Frank Dalton," he said, voice steady. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said, and for the first time since the funeral, I believed someone meant it. We sat at the long conference table, papers stacked neatly. Beck adjusted his glasses. "Let's begin. Dates, names, witnesses, confirmation that Marjorie's will was valid." My stomach tightened with every sentence. Then the words Evan had been waiting for. "Under the terms of the will," Beck said, "the primary residence and bulk of the estate assets are designated to Evan Pierce." Evan leaned back, folding his hands behind his head, a satisfied smile tugging at his mouth. "There it is," he said. "Told you." I felt it like a punch to the ribs. 25 years of marriage, 25 years of life, reduced to a sentence read aloud. Beck continued, "The total value of the estate, including investment accounts and liquid assets, is approximately $27, $5 million. Evan whistled. "Not bad." I stared at the table. For a fleeting moment, I considered standing, walking out, letting him have it all, the house, the money, the memories. I was tired. Beck went on. "Frank Dalton has allocated transitional living assistance and access to certain personal effects as outlined here." Evan laughed, soft, casual, satisfied. "Transitional?" he repeated. "That's generous." Something hot flared in my chest, but it didn't last. I reminded myself of the paper in my folder. Marjorie's voice. "Read everything." Beck stacked the papers neatly and paused. Evan stood. "So, that's it, right? I'll have my people coordinate the property transfer," Evan said, leaning back in his chair, exuding the kind of confidence only a man convinced he already owned the world. Beck didn't stand. He didn't glance at Evan. Instead, he removed his glasses, wiped them with a soft cloth, and placed them carefully back on his nose. His movements were deliberate, measured, like a man about to deliver a lesson. "Mr. Pierce," Beck said calmly, voice steady, almost cold in its clarity. "Before we proceed, there is an additional section of the will we haven't discussed." Evan's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "If it's about furniture, you can keep it. I don't need it." "I'd suggest you sit down," Beck replied, and the room fell into an almost unnatural silence. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to wait. Evan hesitated, brows furrowed, then slowly sank back into the chair. His armor of arrogance remained, but a small crack appeared along its edge. Beck slid another stack of papers across the table toward Evan. "Did you happen to read Section 9 of your mother's will?" he asked. Evan blinked. I read what mattered. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Beck's lips, but it was not friendly. "I recommend you listen carefully to what comes next," he said. My chest tightened. My heart pounded slowly and heavily, like someone walking across a long, empty hall. I felt the air grow thick, the kind of tension that makes you hyper-aware of every small sound, the paper shifting under Beck's fingers, the faint buzz of the fluorescent light, Evan's shallow, uneasy breathing. "Just read it," Evan said finally. his voice tight, but still trying to mask the tremor. "Let's get this over with." Beck didn't immediately comply. He flipped the pages with deliberate care, each turn sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet. Then he paused and met Evan's gaze. "Did you actually read section 9? He asked, calm, but cutting. Evan's confident color drained almost instantly. The edges of his face seemed to sharpen. "I told you," he said, voice rising slightly. "I read the will." Beck nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. Then, finally, he looked at me. "Frank," he said, "this section concerns you directly. I want to explain it clearly." My throat went dry. I nodded, too aware of how fast my heart was racing. Beck folded his hands on the table and leaned slightly forward. "Section 9 establishes what is known legally as a life estate," he said. Evan snorted, disbelief lacing his tone. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Beck continued, voice measured and deliberate, "that while you hold title to the property, Frank Dalton retains the legal right to live in that house for the rest of his life." I felt the room tilt. My pulse jumped. Evan's laugh came out sharp and brittle, almost strangled. "No, that can't be right. My name's on the deed." "Yes," Beck said, steady, "and Frank's right is attached to it. You cannot sell the house. You cannot refinance it. You cannot force him out, not now. Not ever. Not without his written consent." Images flashed through my mind. Evan slamming the door, the trash can, the rain soaking my jacket on the porch. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a safeguard, a tangible proof that Marjorie had thought of everything. Evan pushed his chair back, disbelief and anger colliding. "This is a joke." Beck didn't flinch. "It's very common. Actually, your mother was thorough." Evan's eyes landed on me, really looked at me for the first time like he was seeing a stranger. "You knew about this?" he demanded, voice rising. I shook my head. Silence fell. Evan's jaw tightened, his expression a mix of fury and confusion. Beck continued, calm and unwavering. "Section 9 also addresses the trust." Evan stiffened. "What about it? The $27. $5 million is in a trust. I'm the beneficiary." "You are," Beck said, "but Frank Dalton is the trustee." Time seemed to pause. Evan stared at Beck, then at me. Disbelief painted across his features. "Say that again." "Frank manages the trust," Beck said evenly. "All distributions, all approvals, any large withdrawals require his authorization." "It's impossible," Evan spat, incredulous. "I'm his son." "Stepson," Beck corrected gently. "And this was your mother's decision." Evan's jaw worked, tight as a vice. "So I have to ask him for my own money?" "You receive a monthly distribution," Beck said. "Enough for normal living expenses. Beyond that, Frank determines what qualifies for larger withdrawals: health, education, maintenance, support." I felt something twist inside me, a mix of awe, disbelief, and a creeping sense of empowerment. Marjorie had done this quietly, carefully. She'd placed me between Evan and the money, not as punishment, but as a protective filter. Evan leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "This is ridiculous. He can't control my life." "He doesn't control your life," Beck replied, voice calm. "He controls access to the trust." Evan turned his gaze to me, eyes dark, voice low and dangerous. "You're enjoying this?" I shook my head. "No, I'm surviving it." Beck tapped the page in front of him. "There's one more component to Section 9, a forfeiture clause." Evan froze. "Any attempt to harass, intimidate, or undermine the trustee," Beck said evenly, "results in suspension of discretionary distributions." Evan's face drained of color. "You're saying if I push back, I lose access to my own inheritance?" "Yes," Beck said simply. Evan's chair scraped across the floor as he stood abruptly. "This is insane. You expect me to just be polite?" "I expect you," Beck said, "to follow your mother's wishes." Evan laughed, bitter and sharp. "She wouldn't have done this." "She did," Beck replied, unflinching. For a long moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. I thought of Marjorie at the kitchen table, glasses off, reading every word carefully. She had anticipated Evan's arrogance, his impatience, his assumptions. Evan grabbed the papers, flipping them wildly as if the words might rearrange themselves. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. You can't just, he began. This meeting is not a negotiation, Beck said firmly. Evan's eyes snapped to me. You think you won something? I swallowed hard. I think your mother wanted peace. He scoffed. Then she chose the wrong person. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him, leaving the room unnervingly quiet. Beck gathered the papers calmly. I know this is a lot, he said to me, but legally, your position is solid. I nodded, hands trembling slightly. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. Evan's voice, low and tight. You're going to regret this, Frank. I promise you that. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, listening, realizing for the first time since Marjorie's death what she had truly left me, not just money or responsibility, but the means to stand firm, even when someone tried to erase me.